How about playability? Now, when I spoke with Bunny Carlos a while back, I think I asked him about certain drums that in his collection. I said, "You like things to be playable?" He says, "Yes, I do. Most everything I have, I like to be able to beat it and play it." And I said, "Well, what about things, early things?" He says, "I don't think you should touch anything earlier than 1930." He's saying, "I don't play anything earlier than 1930 because you break a hoop, you crack a hoop, you're stuck. That stuff's hard to find." But as far as you're concerned, do you like everything to be playable, or do you have things that just sit there and look pretty and never make a sound?
Well, I don't play very much anymore, and so statistically, almost everything I buy is not going to be played, or it's going to be tapped a little bit, or maybe it would be played every once in a while because the next time I go out, I want to play the silver one, or I want to play, the blue one. The last time I played the red one. So I understand where he's coming from. I saw this with Kenny Aronoff. He'd go out and he'd have a case that would have 8 snare drums in it that were all different sizes, and some of them were vintage, and it would depend when he was recording or he was playing, he wanted a certain sound, and he'd pull out, drum number 3. Mm-hmm. And I don't, my life's not like that. My life would be more like, well, I'm sitting down and I'm playing, and I'll put a leady snare drum on for a little bit, or put it on the side and play it as an auxiliary. But for the most part, I'm not playing any of them because I might play a set, but I'm not, for example, taking 1940s yellowed white marine pearl Broadway out with me when I play a modern set. I'm not doing that. I have them sort of reverently in my office as good friends. Now, would I ever play something out? Well, I guess it depends on the situation, and I can understand where Bunny's coming from because, yes, you break it and you sit there and you ache for years because you'll never find another, you name it.
Yeah.
You'll never find another one of those strainers or something unless Adrian Kirchler can make one.
And he most certainly can. I mean, Mark Cooper of Cooper's Vintage Drums just showed his I think it's a Leedy Black Elite that he got back from Adrian, and he told me the whole strainer was fabricated by Adrian. I looked at it and said, that is dead on. I was just amazed.
Well, the one I saw that he had, and maybe we were talking about different drums, the one I saw he had looked exactly like a Slingerland Black Beauty. I couldn't believe it. I mean,
that's the latest one. I don't know if I didn't know if he had been sending that picture around. In fact, he told me today that Adrian is just sending that out to him today. Well, we're going to talk about this when Mark comes on again, but I guess he got a hold of a Slingerland shell, blah, blah, blah. There's a lot to the story, but Adrian, he sent it to Adrian, who engraved it. And it now, I said, okay, Mark, does this mean this is the 14th Slingerland Black Beauty? Or do we even call this a Slingerland Black Beauty? Because, yes, it's the shell, but it's been engraved and all that stuff. Looked beautiful.
Vintage parts with modern engraving and modern blacking, I guess. And no, Adrian is like a time machine. He's like taking those craftsmen from the 30s and bringing them here now.
Now on that topic, the Slingerland Black Beauty. I don't know if you've watched the website here, but I recently in the last year discovered or came upon what I found out to be the 13th known to exist 5x14 Slingerland Black Beauty. I was shocked when I got a call from a young man out on the West Coast. But anyways, I'm wondering, with Mark's version now, I don't know if that actually would qualify as a true Slingerland Black Beauty. Should we call that number 14 or not, of the 5x14 size? What's your opinion on that? Well,
I think probably you will find people divided on it, just like they are about everything else in the United States right now. You'll find 50% of the people will say yes, and 50% of the people will say no.
Uh-huh.
So I think I'd like to sit back and wait and see because I understand both arguments. It's exactly the same parts and stuff. It just didn't come out of the factory that way.
And being that it's been engraved in this year, you know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, and what happens if you take a classic car from the 30s and you restore it today, and you find that you're building new lead or something to do a fender? It's the right design. You're going to get 50% of the people say yes, it's okay, and 50% of people say no.
Well, there are purists out there, and that exists here in the vintage drum world also. So speaking of some old drums here, I wanted to bring up the Dual. I think we talked about a little while ago. There was a what was it? A black lacquered Dual. Why don't you tell us about the Dual for those out there that don't know what that is?
Well, Slingerland and Ludwig competed early on, and so you go all the way back to Slingerland starting in 1928. They were in Chicago, and they were a banjo company that got into drums. Ludwig was a drum company that got into banjos, and so they were competing for the great heads to come out of the stockyards of Chicago, and in each case we have a pretty dominant male father and a son coming up in the business. And anyway, there was a lot of battling that went on.
Mm-hmm.
Ludwig had come up with their they had what we call now super sensitive was really the super Ludwig back then. It was a parallel strainer model.
Okay.
And Slingerland came out with a parallel model too that was a little different, but they called it the Dual and spelled it D-U-A-L-L, kind of a marketing name for dual, and that it would do all. So they brought it out, and Slingerland and Ludwig got into a contentious legal battle. And basically what happened was very few Duals were made because they shut it down because of Ludwig's lawsuit. Mike Corrado ended up getting the drum that we're about to describe. Now, I will get emails from people I don't ever know, and they'll ask me things like, can you identify this drum, or what is this worth? And I got an email from some people that had a drum on eBay, and what happens sometimes with eBay is a person looks at something and says, well, I don't know. These are the words you never use in a eBay listing. I don't know anything about drums, but...
Yes.
So they put on this Dual that was clearly black lacquer, solid piece of wood that had come apart at the scarf joint, and they must have had it on there, and somebody, shocked them with the, look, let me buy it from you now, name your price kind of thing, and they decided, well, they had something worth more than the person wanted to offer. So somehow they sent me a note, and I said, well, there are very few Duals. And, you could have a $5,000 drum there. It just really depends, because in anything in life, no matter what somebody tells you it's worth, it's whatever the market says it's worth.
Right.
Things get bought at great prices because the market isn't responding very well, or the right buyers don't know about it. On the other hand, sometimes things get bid up in an emotional frenzy.
Now, at that time, that was, I think, before the market changed, wasn't it?
Oh yeah. Before, yes.
And I don't remember if it. Mike Corrado ended up with it. That's right. I remember now, because I do remember seeing it on eBay, and I think Dave Brown was involved with it too, and but. That drum, if you weren't educated, you'd look at it and say, it just doesn't look like it's anything. It's beat up. It's painted black. There's no pearl on it or anything. But because it was black lacquer, and I've heard you say this, that in your opinion, it's more rare. Well, yeah. This happens all the time, right? Perhaps not all the time. I'll finish that story in a minute. Let me just tell you. I remember one time Steve Maxwell telling somebody that a Rogers set with an 18-inch bass drum that was in red onyx is probably worth more than a Rogers red sparkle
snare drum with an 18-inch, or a red sparkle drum set with an 18-inch bass drum, because the red onyx would be more rare. And I sat there and I thought about it for a long time, and I understand Steve's argument, and my reaction was exactly the opposite. I think a red sparkle would be worth more because that's something a jazz player would play. I've seen jazz players play red sparkle. Red onyx was a rock color that made, and somebody either later on put a red onyx bass drum with other drums, or you could have ordered it that way. But if you're a Rogers guy, Jim,
yes,
you'll know
I was when I was a kid.
They had a lot of blue onyx, and they had a lot of red onyx, but they were rock-sized drums.
Yes.
They weren't 18-inch bass. So anyway, Steve could absolutely be right, and I could be absolutely wrong. It's just what somebody's opinion is at the time.
Right, amazing school of thought, because I would have guessed the red onyx, to tell you the truth. But speaking of red sparkle now, go ahead.
Well, the argument would be red onyx is rarer in that size because that was a rock size. And my point was, what's more, going in the future, what's going to be more sought after? And I would say that would be red sparkle would be more sought after, because that was a really typical, vibrant Rogers color, and and they made all size drums in that.
Yeah.
But it's just where you get on the ride. It's how you look at it. So you want me to go back about the do-all now?
Sure.
What I told you, and I said to the people at the time, and I probably said this to Mike Corrado. Now, the argument against the value of that do-all was, well, it needed to be glued. Well, so what? Throw some glue on it and clamp it.
To me, rare is rare. That's my opinion.
And then B. Well, look, it's just black lacquer. Well, okay. Now we know drummers are showmen, and they, this is why white marine pearl came out, and it's why gold plated stuff has come out, and they still do it. But on the other hand, a very high class drum set back in the 1920s was black lacquer with, knobby gold or art gold trim. Yeah. Most of the do-alls that have come out are white marine pearl, because that's what they were pushing.
Now, I've seen Dave Brown's do-all with the diamond appliques on it.
Sure.
And he's got the whole set. That now, to me, that's just, to find a set in that condition is incredible. Sure.
But if you go back and you go in the catalogs, they talk about their everybody called it different stuff. In fact, Black Beauty was often used for the solid black with the not by Slingerland but by other companies where they would call it that. And I said to him, a black lacquer drum from 1930 would have been a high with art gold on it, would have been an expensive drum, and I think because it was black lacquer, that is a rarer do-all than the typical white marine pearl one would be, or the first color was white marine pearl, and I think the second color out was sparkling gold, and then depending on the company, green came out and stuff. But I think,
right.
But they didn't advertise them painted. They had them, but they didn't advertise them. So I think that's why I said it's a rare thing. So
that's the only one I've ever seen.
If it is rare, what's it worth? Well, it's whatever the market.
Yeah.
Well, and I don't know what Mike paid for it.
Oh, I watched that. I did watch it on eBay.
Get in the middle of these things, because I'm only trying to say, look, guys, it's whatever the market will bear, and have a good conversation about it. I don't want to see somebody get taken advantage of selling it, and I don't want to see somebody getting taken advantage of buying it.
Yeah. Well, now that we're talking about a little bit of pricing here, in general, years ago when you first started out, you had no eBay yet. I'll bet the pickings were really good in those days for finding some of these rare vintage drums. But nowadays, and to keep it quiet, if you were to find something, you'd had a chance with it. But nowadays, I think with the onset with eBay, they make so many things that were thought to be so rare, such as a Ludwig Black Beauty. They're coming out of the woodwork now on eBay. Do you agree?
Well, yeah, and it's pretty easy to become an expert now because there's so much internet information. Google. I'm sure people Google things about vintage drums all the time.
Yeah.
If we go back to 1987 or 88, probably a top end Black Beauty would have been $1,400.
What's the highest they ever got up to?
What's the highest? I'm not sure. I'm not sure what the highest.
Well, say a 20 scroll pattern.
Gotten up to, but the highest. Well, I know of one that was listed for $50,000. I know that. The highest. What's the Slingerland going for now? Slingerlands were, when they came out, they were probably, because they were rare, they were maybe $2,000.
Yeah, well,
I remember when one went for about 20 with sight unseen.
Yeah, well, Bunny, had his. Steve Maxwell has his out there for $20,000 right now, and he'll say, "Just I don't care if I sell it or not, but just there's what he's got it up for." So it was fun doing that for me. Talking to this kid. If you go there's a special page on this website. If you collectors, if you go over there and look at the Slingerland Black Beauty page, stories all there. I interview the kid who called me, and a lot of interesting stuff over there about the Slingerland Black Beauty and who owns what. But it's an interesting story with these rare finishes and rare models. I love talking about them because I have some very rare finishes, and from what I'm seeing here of your pictures, Harry, so did you. Like this Rogers Mardi Gras finish. Why don't you tell the folks about the Mardi Gras finish?
Well, I think the world of Rogers. I went to their factory in Covington, Ohio, about 1966, and it was just a small company. It looked like somebody's family business. Basically, it was a block building that ended up being on a road off the main highway, and it ended up, I found out, years after the fact, it was the private property of Joe Thompson, the inventor of Swivomatic. He just didn't want to leave his house, so they built a factory in his backyard, basically. And Mardi Gras, I'm not sure the first time I saw it, but you'll hear people describe that as confetti over black.
All right.
And Steve Maxwell's been able to have some reissues done, and he's having Gretsch drums covered in it. But Gretsch didn't have Mardi Gras. Mardi Gras was a finish that Rogers had, and Slingerland and Leedy Chicago had, and then they had the white version of it. Again, Steve Maxwell's had that reissued called Fiesta, and that's it was a milk white, which kind of yellows over the years, and it's got confetti over it too.
Was there a Capri?
Capri was a Slingerland color. I've seen Camco in it too. Capri sort of looks like gold rods and some I don't know how to describe it. It's one of those things I know how to see.
But they were all versions of
or something.
Yeah, they were all versions of this Fiesta Mardi Gras type. They were either the black is for Rogers, and the other companies had the lighter ones. But some of these finishes I see when I go to the Chicago show. Now, I've never seen you there, Harry, and I don't know if you actually make your rounds to the shows, but it's a blast when I do these interviews there. I see some very rare finishes, such as maybe Autograph of the Stars. You want to tell us about that?
Sure. Oh, yeah, sure. Yeah. Well, the argument is, why are these rare?
Yeah.
Why are these rare? Well, one of the answers is they're rare because they couldn't sell them at the time. Because they were
just not good sellers. The people didn't react to them.
Now think about this. Would you really want to buy a drum set that's the signatures of other guys that play drums?
Well, they were all the endorsers of Leedy at the time, weren't they?
I know, but back then there was really only one endorser anybody ever wanted to see, and that was Krupa.
Of course.
And I just laugh at it's Top Hat and Cane, same thing. I mean,
yes.
Ludwig and Ludwig came out with Top Hat and Cane as the Leedy division came out with Autograph of the Stars, and they just couldn't sell this stuff, and so that's why it's rare.
Yeah.
The Mardi Gras, I would tell you, is about the same thing. It came out, and if it would have sold a lot, I don't think they would have stopped making it in Italy. What they kept making was blue sparkle, red sparkle, silver sparkle, black diamond,
staple,
and white marine pearl.
Yep.
Because that's what they sold. That's what people wanted.
Yeah.
But I love Mardi Gras, and I have a whole bunch of Rogers Mardi Gras drums, and I always love it when I hear that something's been found in it. I think I like Fiesta, but I like Mardi Gras better. It's kind of real show businessy, and I think it's great to look at.
With the Mardi Gras, now I did a little segment early on years ago when I was starting to do these videos just from my drum room, and okay, I had a couple of sets of Mardi Gras Rogers, but from different eras, and I'll bet you're hip to this already. The different versions of the Mardi Gras finish. One was an Eagle Badge, more 50s set, and the other set was late, maybe 60s, definitely different patterns of Mardi Gras. Are you familiar with that?
Oh, sure. And
how did that happen? I mean, I don't understand why they should be different like that.
Well, I'll tell you a story that came to me from the guy that was in charge of Rogers for years, Ben Strauss, who was just a great guy.
Mm-hmm.
He said, funniest thing happened. They got like 8 different variations of black diamond pearl. 8 different variations of it. And he said, what do you do? You got to try to match it. So they were running around trying to match it so that they get drum orders in for black diamond pearl. They were trying to make sure how that this set could go out and all its black diamond was the same. And so you can never buy another drum. I mean, you'll see this on eBay or any used set where somebody got a drum later and it doesn't quite match.
Right.
The blue sparkle's a little lighter. The blue sparkle's a little darker. It's just you had to buy it all at the same time, or unless you got the typical things. I don't think I ever heard anybody, not the glitters now, but the sparkles. I don't think I ever heard anybody say silver sparkle didn't match, or the gold sparkle didn't match. They might fade over the years, but a new one pretty much looks the same. But some of the glitters, they would have a darker shade. I don't know if that's because at one point all the plastics were made here, and then they all went over and were made in Italy.
Okay.
And I know there have been complaints over the years that they aren't made as well as they used to be made because the young people, this is so common an argument about just about the young people don't want to learn how to do it. They're not patient, like the older guys.
Yeah.
So it just doesn't come out the same. I don't know if that's true or not, but there are shade differences, and there's just still getting around it. It's the year they bought it.
I always
Slingerland's blue sparkle is amazing. They're real dark blue, and those have red sparkle backs on them, and they're really dark. And then there are other, lighter blue sparkles.
More minutia.
Ludwig didn't have that happen, but Slingerland did.
Only you would know that. That's what kills me about you. You and Dr. Carl Wenck.
Sure.
You guys are just you're encyclopedias. It's just that's amazing.
If you ever take old plastic off, and I did that, that's the first time I see it. This really dark blue sparkle, and on the back of it, it's red sparkle, and on the back of the lighter blue sparkle is white. It's like, oh, how about that, huh?
I get confused when they'll call something sparkling blue or blue sparkle. Is it just the different companies that chose to do that, or was there really something different? No,
they're the same. It's just that I think you have to look at Slingerland and Ludwig and know that they were watching each other, and if one of them said something was blue sparkle, the next guy said it was sparkling blue. And how many times the word king gets in there, Radio King, and then Ludwig has the Speed King, and then Slingerland has the Tempo King.
Right.
Yeah.
But we're talking about sparkles of the 60s? Is that what you're basically referring to, that they're similar? Because I've seen the earlier look like dust, gold dust, maybe drums from the 30s. I think there's a difference there, and that's kind of where I get confused with gold sparkle, but it looks like dust.
The first gold was very fine. Very fine. I mean, it looks like particles.
And they called it sparkle in those days?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, Leedy, I think, called theirs. I think they called it gold sparkle.
Okay.
But then Ludwig, WFL, called it gold flash. And then
that's it.
Yeah, so but it was the same thing. It's just they didn't want to use the exact same name the competitor used.
Mm-hmm.